Hey guys, I'm here again with another video, and today I'll be talking about a horror movie that made big waves when it was released, The Conjuring. But did you know that this movie was based on real-life occurrences? Before we get into the real-life hauntings of families that spawned the plot of the movie, let's get a little background knowledge. The Conjuring is a classic horror movie released in 2013. It was met with heavy praise from movie critics, with most people saying the movie was birthed from the mind of director James Wan, but the movie plot spawned from the true experience of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Ed Warren was a veteran of World War II and a former police officer who later became a self-proclaimed demonologist after studying the subject on his own. His wife Lorraine claimed to be a medium capable of communicating with any demons Ed encountered. Together, they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research in 1952, the oldest ghost hunting group in New England today. They quickly became famous and respected paranormal investigators after the results of their investigations of the Amityville hauntings. Their two most popular cases were even more popularized by their adoption in the Conjuring movie franchise, focusing on their experiences exorcising demons from two possessed families. Though the movie seems overly dramatized, making it hard to believe, the Warrens maintain that all the events portrayed in the movie happened. Now, for the actual real-life hauntings the franchise was adopted from. The first investigations of the Warrens, the Perron Family. The true story behind the first film of the Conjuring franchise focuses on the Perron family. The Perron family recently moved into a 14-room farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, around January 1971, when Roger, Carolyn, and their 5 daughters began to notice some strange occurrences around the house. It all began with small things, then gravitated to more serious hauntings. Carolyn would notice that the broom was or seemed to be moving around the house of its own volition. Sometimes she would hear the sound of something scraping against the walls of the kettle when no one was in the kitchen. Other times, she'd find little piles of dirt in the middle of the newly cleaned kitchen floor. The girls also began to notice spirits around the house, though most of them were harmless. There were a few that were angry and could cause harm. At this point, Carolyn allegedly researched the history of the home and discovered that it was used by the same family for 8 generations, and many of them had died under horrifying or mysterious circumstances. Several of the children in different generations had drowned in a nearby creek. One was murdered, and a handful of them committed suicide by hanging themselves in the attic. The spirit that was used as the antagonist on the film, Bathsheba, was the worst of them all. Andrea Perron, the oldest of the 5 girls, stated that this spirit, she said, and I quote, "Whomever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be the mistress of the house, and she hated the competition my mother provided for that position." As it turns out, there was a real person by the name of Bathsheba Sherman who lived on the Perron's property around the mid-1800s. She was rumored to have been a Satanist, and there was some evidence she had been involved in the untimely death of a neighbor's child, though no trial for the case ever took place. She was buried in a Baptist cemetery in downtown Harrisville, a little distance from the house. The Perrons believed that it was Bathsheba's spirit that was tormenting them. Based on the account with Andrea, the family had encounters with other spirits as well that had the smell of rotting flesh and could cause beds to rise off the floor. She also claimed her father would go down to the basement on multiple occasions and feel a cold, stinking presence behind him. They tried to avoid going down in the dirt-floored cellar as much as possible, but the home heater would mysteriously fail and Roger would have to venture down to see the cause of the problem. For the 10 years that the Perron family stayed in the house, the Warrens took several trips over to investigate. At a point, Lorraine conducted a seance in an attempt to contact the spirits that were haunting the house and troubling the family. Carolyn Perron became possessed. She spoke in strange tongues and was levitating over the chair she once sat in. Andrea claims to have secretly witnessed the seance and spoke on the encounter. "I thought I was going to pass out. My mother began to speak a language not of this world and a voice not of her own. Her chair levitated and she was thrown across the room," she said. Though in the movie adaptation, Ed performed an exorcism rather than a seance, but Lorraine insists she and her husband would never attempt an exorcism, as it needs to be performed by Catholic priests to be effective. After the event of the seance, Roger kicked the Warrens out, worried about the mental health of his wife. The family continued to stay at the house due to financial restrictions, but were able to move out in 1980, at which point the spirits were subdued and the haunting ceased permanently. The second investigation of the Warrens, the Enfield Haunting. About 6 years after the paranormal encounters of the Perron family, another family in Enfield, England, also began to experience similar occurrences in their home. Around August of 1977, the Hodgson family started experiencing signs of haunting. They claimed to hear and see strange things. Janet, who was 11 then, recalled an experience she had one night. She was sitting up on her bed when she saw her dresser slide across the room. She shared the room with her brother. "We shouted, 'Mom, Mom,'" she said in her account of the experience. "We were sort of frightened, but also a bit intrigued." That was the first encounter that triggered a series of paranormal experiences. Later, the family began to hear knocking sounds coming from different parts of the different rooms in the house. She remembered her mom thought the sounds were coming from burglars trying to break into the home or drifters who were hiding out in their home and calling the police to investigate. The officer who was called up and went to their home in response reported seeing a chair rise from the floor and move across the room on its own. Reporters from the Daily Mirror, who were called to the house to report on the Enfield haunting, also encountered some paranormal experiences themselves. Legos and marbles were reported flying across the room by themselves, hot to the touch when picked up. Clothing folded neatly on tabletops would suddenly leap off them and fly halfway across the room. The sound of barking dogs would be heard in empty rooms. Lights would flicker on and off continuously. Coins would drop on the floor right out of thin air. And furniture around the house would spin or tip over without being touched. One day, the iron fireplace in an upstairs bedroom was ripped out of the wall by no normal means. After this incident, paranormal investigators from all over the world showed up at the house, claiming to be able to contact spirits, all to know more about the hauntings taking place in Enfield. After hearing the stories from the family, most of the investigators decided that the children had been faking their experiences and had given false stories because one of them admitted to doing so on one occasion. But the Warrens came to a different conclusion when they arrived at the home. They showed up and immediately believed that a paranormal presence was haunting the home. However, their claims were overlooked as a notable skeptic accused Ed Warren of exaggerating paranormal events and making some up at that time. He claimed that he often transformed a case of haunting into that of a demonic possession. In 1979, roughly 2 years after they began, the hauntings abruptly ceased, though the family maintains they took no action to stop them. These are the 2 investigations carried out by the Warrens, which acted as the base to draft out the plot for the horror movie, The Conjuring. For those who have seen the movie, do you think the real-life hauntings match the horror movie portrayed? Or did the movie do a better job, sending a chill or two down your spine? Let me know in the comments section below. And for those of you who haven't seen the movie, now is as good a time as any. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, and consider leaving a like if you found this video entertaining, and subscribe to the channel for more horror and scary stories and events.